All right, according to the little message on the screen here, it is showtime. I got to get my chair set up. Yeah, there we go. Somehow, the camera's different when we record this here on StreamYard when we do our live stream, as opposed to when when I record the morning Pitt episodes. I guess I do that on a different streaming software, do it in a different program, and so I have to move my chair differently, adjust the camera, and try and make all those things. And then once we bring Jim in and we're on the split screen, then it looks different. It looks even more different in that case. So it's a lot of strains to keep in the old duder's head. But it is Wednesday night. It's a live Panther-Lair Show here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. People are rolling in for a little bit of Pitt conversation, and just to get the news buzz going, Pitt got a commitment earlier today. Football commitment, quarterback for the 2026 recruiting class, Angelo Renda. We'll talk about him quite a bit tonight, I think. We'll get your comments and questions. If you have some thoughts or questions about Pitt's new quarterback commitment, you can post them right over there in the chat screen. We'll read those comments and answer those questions and react to it, and you can we'll have a little conversation, a little bit of back and forth. You, me, Jim, anybody else who wants to jump in and talk about Pitt sports. Of course, there's also the Pitt basketball team's 4-game losing streak, which is not going to be changed anytime soon because they've got a week off here between games from Saturday to Saturday. Probably a good time to have a week off just to sort of reset and recalibrate. But then again, maybe they would tell you that they'd prefer to get out there and get right back on the horse and try to end the losing streak sooner rather than later. It's probably one of those things that you decide what's best in retrospect. Well, it was really good. We got some time off. Or, well, it was really good to get right back out there. Jeff Capel probably gave the team a few days off. He likes to say that they need time away from basketball and things like that. Whatever. The ends will determine whether it's not about the ends justifying the means. It'll be decided after the fact whether or not it was a good thing to have a week off. It'll go to I think they go to Syracuse, right? For this one. No, it's home against Syracuse. Home against Syracuse it's at Syracuse. At Syracuse on Saturday. That's a quad 3 game for Pitt. So this is really what this game is coming up here. It's the first opportunity in a while that Pitt has had to take a bad loss. And they've, for whatever you can say about what they've done this season, they've avoided bad losses. And that's a major credit to them, because the thing that ultimately, there were a couple of things that kept them out of the NCAA tournament last year, and it was, some bad losses were a part of it. A bad non-conference schedule, and then bad losses ultimately doomed them and cost them a chance at the NCAA tournament. Thus far, they've improved the non-conference schedule. They got that part taken care of, and they've avoided the bad losses. Now, eventually, at some point, you'd like to add a few quad 1 or quad 2 wins, and they'll get a few of those opportunities coming up. I think they've got 1, 2, 3, as it currently stands, 4 more quad 1 games on the schedule, plus 1, 2, 3 more quad 2 games. Things can always move. That number was actually flip-flopped. It was 3 quad 1s and 4 quad 2s prior to today, but Wake Forest moved into the top 75, and that makes that a quad 1 game on February 1st. Nonetheless, you'd like Pitt to eventually get a few of those games, but they do need to avoid the bad losses along the way. And they'll get their first real shot at that on Saturday when they go to Syracuse and take on the Orange at the whatever the hell dome. Let's bring in Jim and see what he's got going on. Jim, I'm plugged into something different today. How are you? I want to see if I can hear you.
I'm good. How are you?
Dang.
No.
So, Jim, I was plugged in. I can hear myself through my microphone, and then I can really, tell if I'm making the P sounds too loud. We talked about this last week, I believe. Yeah. But I can't hear you when I do that. So now I have to plug into my computer. Now I can hear you, but I can't hear myself. So I'm just going to have to hope that I moderate how strongly I'm making a P sound, or at least angle my, angle away from it a little bit. But anyway, what's going on?
Not much. It's cold.
It is. It's it was almost in double. It was in double digits earlier today, so that was a real step up.
Yeah, it got up to like 11 or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we started the day in negatives, so it's good to get out of that. I don't think we'll be in the minuses tomorrow. I think we're in a We're gonna hit into a heat wave here. Yeah, heat wave. You're not going to Syracuse, are you?
No, I figured I could probably just do that one from home.
Good plan. Good plan. Any of these other road games? I mean, it's at Syracuse, at Wake, at Carolina, at SMU, at Notre Dame, at Louisville, at NC State, at Boston College. Or that's never mind. The Boston College game is at home. Any of those other ones
that I might go to
that you would go to?
I've tossed around the idea of doing one of the North Carolinas, like those back-to-back weekends, either Wake or North Carolina. We'll see. We'll see how these next couple games go. And who knows? I might just hold it all for Charlotte at the end.
Yeah. Is that that's where the tournament is this year, huh?
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. I don't know. I feel like, did you go to Greensboro? Where did you go? Or did you go to DC?
Last year I went to DC. I did Greensboro 2 years ago, but it was the NCAA tournament. That's where they lost to Xavier.
Right.
But
that's right. I just wonder if that has more of a homey feel than whatever Charlotte's like big arena is, you know?
The Greensboro Coliseum's huge. It's actually
really?
It's like 22,000. It's like
okay.
gigantic. It's one of the biggest arenas I've ever been in. So it's cavernous.
All right. Never mind. Scrap that thought then. Maybe you'll be in the homely Charlotte arena, whatever that thing is called. Anyway, we'll talk about basketball in a little bit, but all the questions that are coming in here, everything that people are talking about is the new quarterback who committed today, Angelo Renda, quarterback out of South Lake Carroll High School, committed to Pitt, got his offer less than 3 weeks ago. Looks like Cade Bell and Jacob Bernowski visited him yesterday. He committed today. We'll talk about who he is in a second, but you got a chance to interview him earlier. What did he tell you about why he picked Pitt? Like, why jump on this offer less than 3 weeks after getting it and so early in the process?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to him a little bit, and it was that was how I kind of started off. I was like, okay, you got an offer 3 weeks ago, and now you're committed. Like, how'd this go? And it just sounded like he really built a good connection with Cade Bell. I think there might have been some contact a little bit before the offer came in, so it might be a little bit longer than 3 weeks, but yeah, I mean, he plays an up-tempo style of offense in Texas high school football, one of the more successful programs in Texas high school football, and he just saw a fit for himself in Pitt's offense, and it was a school willing to take him right then and there, and I think I get the sense that he's being overlooked because he's 6 foot, 180 pounds. Just if you look at South Lake Carroll. 15-1 this past year. It's the same high school that produced Quinn Ewers, Greg McElroy, Chase Daniel. Like I think they have like 15 Division I quarterbacks like in the Rivals database. So like he has this, like he's at the right school. He's putting up the same numbers. He's doing everything right. He's just a little bit smaller than some of those guys. But like I don't know, from Pitt's point of view, he kind of looks like he fits. I mean, he kind of runs the offense already. He kind of has a good feel for it. He's mobile. I think, you look at him, you look at Mason Heinschel, the two quarterbacks Cade Bell has gone after, and there's a lot of similar traits, and it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Couple other quarterbacks. Graham Knowles is at Georgia Tech. He's from South Lake Carroll. Caden Anderson, who I think was I think Knowles was right before Renda took over as a starting quarterback. Caden Anderson is at Wyoming. I think he was maybe between Quinn Ewers and Graham Knowles, but also Kenny Hill, who led TCU to an 11-win season in 2016. Obviously, Riley Dodge, who's the head coach now, the son of Todd Dodge. He was threw for 8,000 yards in 2 years and went on to North Texas and had a successful career. And Chris Brown, who was a kicker for the Steelers, was a quarterback at South Lake Carroll, actually back in the 1990s. Chris with a K. Yeah, kicked for the Steelers and the Titans and one other team, was a quarterback for South Lake Carroll back in the day. So it's, I mean, yeah, and then he steps in as his first year as a starter, throws for 3,900 yards, 40 touchdowns, 11 picks, leads him to a 15-0 start before they lose the state championship game. I mean, there was no fall off. You know what I mean? He stepped right in and just hit the ground running and was pretty dominant right from the jump. Josh Newark wants to know, is the new recruit the best Texas quarterback Pitt has ever recruited? So, I mean, was the combination Nate Yarnell and Trey Anderson?
I think there might be some random one we're forgetting, but yeah, I think it's just a head-to-head. And I mean, the same thing with Nate Yarnell, we were saying, oh, Lake Travis, they have like a million Division I quarterbacks. He's the next one in line. But like the thing with Nate is like he started like 6 games in high school. It was like
Yeah.
he wasn't part of that like lineage. He was just like kind of a fill in the one year, and he did really well. And Pitt kind of jumped on him. So I don't know. I would probably lean with Angelo on that
Yeah.
question.
Because Nate, like, what he took over for Hudson Card, right, in the middle of his junior season when Card got hurt. And then
Right.
Card came back in the playoffs. And then the next year, Nate was supposed to be the guy, but it was the COVID year. It was 2020.
He
And I
got
think he got
hurt. Yeah.
hurt. Right.
Yeah.
So he never really, like, he was supposed to be awesome. And he came from this place, like you said, with a great lineage, but he never he didn't have a season like Angelo Renda had this year. And he's going to have a chance to even build on it and be even better next year. Adam Vinchik wants to know, do you think the new commitment and Mason Heinschel from this year's class have some of the same intangibles? I think the biggest thing there, Jim, is just the mobility, right? The rushing. Like I said, Angelo Renda rushed for 14 touchdowns, averaged 7 yards per carry this past season. Heinschel was obviously an improviser and a guy you could run draws and design runs, but also could, make something happen when the play breaks down. I think there's some overlap there. I think Renda might be a little bit shorter. I don't know. I don't know if have you watched enough of these two guys yet to have a thought on arm strength comparison?
I'm not quite there yet, but like I think the same mobility factor. It's like neither one's like a running quarterback, but they can make plays with their feet. And I think that's kind of true of Eli Holstein too. I wouldn't call him a runner, but he's able to do that and run the offense effectively. So again, I think it's just like kind of stacking two quarterbacks back to back. And I think a big thing for Pitt in this is just going and identifying a quarterback and getting them right away. I mean, there was a couple years prior to this where they were kind of wait. They would have a top target, then they'd be like, maybe we'll watch a few more guys throw. Then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, we don't have a quarterback, or the year they do, it's Kenny Minchie and he decommits. So I think it was good to kind of get a guy you want that fits your system early. And whenever I talked to Angelo Renda, his big thing was, yeah, like I want to be part of the class. I want to help recruit. I'm already talking to guys and that's kind of what Mason Heinschel did last year. I mean, he was one of Pitt's first commits. I don't know if he was the very first one, but like maybe second or third. And
yeah, I think he was second after Trevor Summers. Yeah.
But he kind of took on that role of like, okay, like I'll text all the recruits. I'll make sure everyone's good. Like he was at Pitt as much as possible. And like kind of the weird thing with this is like, there's a possibility Angelo Renda could be around a good bit. He has some connections to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, did he? I didn't get a chance to read your article yet. I know I had seen mention that his dad travels to Pittsburgh a lot, and that he has cousins who wrestled at Pitt. Did he get into that at all with you?
He didn't get into the wrestling part, but he did say his dad's frequently visiting there for work, and like he's like, yeah, I've been to Steeler games. I like the food in Pittsburgh's awesome. I love it up there. Like he's been around Pittsburgh, so he said he hasn't quite been to like Oakland or the South Side facility. He hasn't been to Pittsburgh as a recruit, but like he has a kind of good feel already, kind of knowing what he's getting into.
Yeah, it's good. It is important, I think, to get those guys. And like you said, Heinschel became a leader right off the bat, and it seems like Renda will do the same thing. The mobility piece too is interesting to me. It just seems like, and I'm going to bring up this question here to kind of play off of this. ZC717 says, what are your thoughts on the Texas quarterback recruit? His stats look pretty good. He seems to fit what Pitt is looking for. I think like when you look at Bell's quarterback targets, and I think we talked about this last year in January, February, when he had offered like 5 or 6 guys had emerged as sort of top targets for Bell, including Mason Heinschel. They all, or like 5 out of 6 or 4 out of 5 had mobility. Like they clearly could get out and run and put up big numbers running wise. And I mean, everybody wants a quarterback who can move, right? Nobody wants a statue in the pocket anymore. But I think there's something to be said in this offense and what Bell is looking for in terms of mobility and the value of it. I mean, I think you saw, the Virginia game, the Boston College game, the Toledo game. Like there were plays that could have been made with Eli Holstein and his mobility, and those plays didn't get made when you didn't have him. And so I think, you look at Angelo Renda, he looks like a fit in terms of the efficiency. Completing 70% of his passes. Even in the state championship game, he threw 2 picks and he still completed like 69% of his passes. So there's huge, great efficiency numbers, throws a lot of touchdowns, and he's able to get out and run. some of this stuff is like, yeah, that's obvious. Every coordinator wants an efficient quarterback who throws a lot of touchdowns and can run, but it seems like there's a particularly good fit for this offense. And I don't think Bell has really been, it's not like he's been all over the place offering different types of quarterbacks. He's offered the same kind of guy, like Mason Heinchel and Angelo Renda might be slightly different in height, but all these guys that he has offered over the last 2 years, it feels like they're all like 5'11" to maybe 6'1", and they can run. It's like we always joke about all the receivers are 5'9" to 5'11". All the quarterbacks are right around that height range. I think Bell is willing to sacrifice height to get a little bit of speed and mobility out there.
I agree, and like I think like one of the first things like on our board today is like, oh, like not every small quarterback successful. I'm like, that's in the NFL. Like you could be a really good college quarterback and be 5'10" to 6 foot. Like there's no rules against it, especially like if you're rolling out. And I think that's a lot of what Pitt likes to do, kind of press the issue with tempo. And like I think that's why like recruiting Texas makes sense, because you look at all those high schools, that's what they run, and that's why the Big 12 is what it is. And like a lot of the Texas schools play this way. It's because that's what they do in high school. So if Pitt's going to play this way, I don't know. I'm not expecting Pitt to go down and harvest a bunch of guys out of Texas, but it's possible now. Like I think guys are willing to take chances and maybe commit somewhere they wouldn't commit, and maybe that's kind of part of it with Angelo Renda.
I'm just looking. Chase Daniel on ProFootballReference.com was listed at 6 foot 218. I think Ewers is a little bit bigger. Yeah, Quinn Ewers is like 6'3" or something like that. But yeah, I mean, like these smaller guys, you can absolutely make it work and be successful with it. And it's interesting to look at quarterback recruiting kind of overall, because I think you mentioned something along these lines a few minutes ago. But like, Frank Signetti, for one thing, I think it's hard to recruit quarterbacks when you're brand new. You know what I mean? When you just got there, you're recruiting against everybody else who has all these relationships built up. You kind of scramble. Signetti ends up getting, who did he get in his first class? So he got hired. So it would have been the class of 23 would have been Kenny Minchie, right? So he ends up scrambling for Ty Diefenbach. Mm-hmm. Class of 24, I guess he took Duggar, right? He took Julian Duggar.
But they had there was that one guy from Florida. It always seemed like they were going to get, but then he ended up being like a walk-on somewhere. So like I guess that was a misevaluation from like 100 people.
Yeah, they I don't really know what they were doing when they were recruiting quarterbacks. Particularly, like, I don't have an issue with them taking Duggar. I just, like, you could have taken him a long time ago. You didn't need to wait until the summer to get him. And they just kind of messed around with a bunch of guys and never really got anywhere, never really got much traction with any quarterbacks. But, like, you go back before that, Mark Whipple didn't really like to recruit, and he didn't really sign many guys. Like, what do you get? He got Yarnell in the class of 21. Joey Yellen. Yeah. Joey Yellen is a transfer, and that's it. I mean, like Davis Bevel was a Sean Watson recruit in the 2019 class, right? And Kenny, I guess Nick Patty was a Watson recruit.
What about Ricky Town? Is that a person?
That is a person.
Is he part of the?
He came in, I think, in 2017, the same year as Max Brown. Because I
don't know why I'm crossing wires with him with somebody, but
he was a JUCO guy. Okay. Like we people talked about him as a transfer because he had been, I think, at USC as well. Okay. But he went to a JUCO before he ended up at Pitt. I don't know if he really wanted to play at all. Like, I don't know if anybody actually expected him to do anything. But I think that was 2017. It might have been 2018 when he came in.
Okay.
But either way, to some extent, I think quarterback recruiting suffers when you change coordinators as often as Pitt has. But Bell, I think, has kind of hit the ground running in his second year, although this isn't somebody he's been building a long relationship with. Again, it's just been kind of going for a little bit. But I do think Bell might be the most dynamic recruiting offensive coordinator that Narduzzi has had. I mean, the bar is set remarkably low in that regard. If you look at Jim Chaney, Matt Canada, Sean Watson, Mark Whipple, and Frank Signetti. I don't even know who I could tell you was the best recruiter out of that group. Maybe Signetti. But otherwise, it's not a very dynamic group in terms of recruiting. up to Bell. I think Bell is a really good recruiter. I think he's got energy and he works hard, and has done a nice job and probably will continue doing a nice job. Let's see. I thought there was some other comments here about this. Maybe not. Well, people are getting into some different conversations. But did you, any other thoughts on getting this quarterback today?
I didn't see it coming, but like whenever we saw the tweet from Pat Narduzzi, my first thought went to, oh, they just hosted 30 Junior Day visitors.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe we should start there, like the 30 guys that have offers that were on campus. So that's where my head went to. So I don't know. I thought that was an interesting process too, kind of sticking with recruiting a little bit. There was a lot of, which is natural with junior days. A lot of Pennsylvania, a lot of New Jersey, a lot of Ohio, but a lot of Pennsylvania guys. And, I've been looking at that. And, some years they go up, some years they go down in terms of what they sign in the state of Pennsylvania. But it seems this year, like, there's enough guys, like, kind of within their range that they could probably land a few. I don't know. We talked to some of them at least.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who comes back in the spring, and then obviously for the official visits. But they haven't had a really good haul out of Pennsylvania in, particularly even beyond like the WIPIO, because you could go back to like 2021 when they got Nikai Johnson or Dorian Ford, Nikai Johnson, and Elliot Donald and all that stuff. But like beyond Western Pennsylvania, like they haven't really done all that. They got Kenny Johnson one year.
The current freshman, I think they had 7.
Oh yeah, you're right. That was like a big deal.
Yeah,
that was a big deal. Like last spring or last summer, like, oh look, they've got all these Pennsylvania guys. It was that's right. I forgot about that. Seems like a long time ago. There's a lot that's happened since then.
A lot. Yeah.
All right. Pitt Tough Guy says $20.5 million player pay and additional house settlement fallout hits Pitt beginning in July. What will the house settlement cost Pitt? Who ultimately pays those costs, and what is Pitt's plan? What will the house settlement cost Pitt? So I had forgotten about, there's like 20 million or so in revenue sharing, but then there's like more on top of that, right? There's like back pay basically for former student athletes and a little bit more. I feel like I forget what the number was going to like settle in at. Let's just say it's 20 million, Jim. Who ultimately pays those costs? I mean, it's Pitt. Right? Like this isn't something you can try to fundraise for it, but Pitt is going to have to find ways to come up with this money, right? I mean, like, I don't know where else it would come from. Right.
Right. I mean, it in just its purest form, it's revenue sharing. All the revenue Pitt gets, it's going to have to be shared with the athletes. So all that TV money, the bowl appearances, the NCAA tournament appearances, like any type of revenue Pitt generates, like it's in one giant big pot, and like now 20 million of it has to go to the players, and it doesn't just go to the general fund paying coaches and all that stuff. Like, okay, so like, yeah, that's going to make things tighter. I think everyone knows that, but yeah, I mean, that's where it's coming from. It's Pitt. It's that money. It's that ACC money. It's that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And, I think from the time this all was announced, we all said, well, if you have to come up with $20 million, that means you need to cut 20 million from your budget, and I think there was something like Indiana University is cutting 24 jobs or something like that. And I think that was one of the first things I thought of when all of this was announced, was like, there's going to be some trimming back in the athletic department, both in terms of staffers, administrative, but also probably programs. And I hadn't really thought about it in a while. Just other things got on my mind, like a 6-game losing streak and basketball and all these different things. But like, yeah, we talked about this a lot over the summer, that like, they're going to have to cut some programs. Like, you have to find those areas that you can cut to try and make up that 20 million. And I think, and it was sort of not to be like, gallows humor, but I mean, I think we talked about programs that could potentially be on the chopping block. And, I remember we talked about baseball, and I think people will be disappointed about baseball, but like, that costs some money. It costs some money for facilities and upkeep and scholarships and all those things. And like, obviously it doesn't cost the most money. The most money goes to football and probably basketball second most, but like, these things cost money. And, how much do they bring in? It's one of those hard decisions among many that Alan Green is going to have to make. But like, there are going to be people who lose their jobs, and there are going to be sports that lose their support from the university. And it's probably still not going to make up 20 million, but it's going to be necessary to try and get close to that number.
Yeah, I never really thought about it, but like you see just how big a Division I athletic department is and how many people work and are involved in that. And it's like, yeah, like there might be a few less people sitting like around, and it's kind of like sad to think about it that way. But like, I mean, I think we both talked about sports. Like that was the first thing. Like, yeah, they're going to cut something, and they're probably going to have to. I don't know what it's going to be. I mean, I'm with you. I think baseball, like for Pitt in this environment, especially just because they're never really all that good at it, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to, keep funding it if you're going to try to commit to being in that top tier with football and basketball, which I think Pitt is still trying to do. I mean, you're going to have to sacrifice to maintain that level.
Yeah. Everybody always talks about like, oh, when football breaks off and forms its own thing, maybe it's not going to be football breaking off and forming its own thing. It's just going to be the other sports dying off as like sponsored, official athletic sports, and not just clubs or intramurals. But yeah, the last part of that question was, what is Pitt's plan? I don't know. Do you know what Pitt's plan is?
No, we never talked to the previous athletic director, and we really haven't talked to the current athletic director about such plans either. So
yeah, haven't really gotten that down yet, but we'll keep trying. ZC717 says, Pat Narduzzi deserves criticism for the decision to kick a field goal in the game above Sports Bowl, but Marcus Freeman may have topped that by deciding to kick a field goal down 2 scores in the title game. What was Notre Dame down? 16 when he kicked that field goal?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like a 4th and long, right? Like it was like a 4th and 9 or 4th and 10 or something. I mean, like it wasn't good. You should obviously go for the touchdown. You're down 16. That's 2 scores. Like a field goal keeps you down 2 scores, and so I don't really see how that's better. You're turning a 2-score game into a 3-score game effectively by kicking that field goal. I still might say 4th and goal from the 1 is a worse decision to kick in double overtime. When you're the last team scoring, I think that still might be a worse decision.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, like I get the whole like 2-score game, nothing changed, but man, like all Pitt had to do was just push Julian Duggar forward, and they won the game, and that would have been it.
Push Julian Duggar forward, push Gavin Bartholomew forward, push any number of guys. Yes. Josh Newark wants to know, has Pitt increased their turnovers during this 4-game losing streak? A little Pitt basketball question here. And is it just me, or has Jaylen Lowe been turning the ball over more? So he had 8 turnovers against Florida State. Yes. That has influenced the numbers. Now he still had like 3 or 4 in each of the other games in that stretch, but the 8 turnovers against Florida State is a big problem. I will say this, and I've tried to point this out because I think it's relevant. He had 8 turnovers against Florida State. Florida State was pressuring him a lot, getting really physical with him, trapping him a lot, and he didn't handle it well. But of his 8 turnovers, 6 were in the first half, which is abysmal. That's terrible. But only 2 turnovers in the second half. And I think it's important. Florida State didn't really change how they were defending him. It was working. So they kept doing it, but he handled it better. He approached it better. There were adjustments made, and he went from 6 turnovers in the first half to 2 in the second half. I think that's important because we all wanted and want Jaylen Lowe to be this finished product who just shows up and is ready to go this year. And he, should be a Naismith Award winner and all this stuff. And like, I think he's been really good, and he is really good, but he is still a sophomore, didn't even start his full freshman year. Maybe some allowance for up and down play is acceptable, because I don't think it's been all down. Jaylen Lowe is taking a beating on our boards, Jim, where like people are talking about he's the biggest issue. He's the biggest problem. I mean, he's still averaging 17 points per game over this losing streak. He's not shooting well. And yeah, the turnovers are an issue, but like I just said, I think he improved in that Florida State game. And as we've been pointing out on the side, like he's got at least like 1 or 2 turnovers each game that are not his fault. He passes to a guy, and it might happen to be a very tall guy wearing number 2 who just fumbles the ball, and it goes down as a Jaylen Lowe turnover. I don't think Lowe has been the biggest issue. I think there are a number of issues that are the biggest issues. I think there have been more turnovers, and Lowe is responsible for some of those. But I don't know, not to co-opt Josh's question here, but I'm not quite as down on Jaylen Lowe as a lot of people on the board are. Are you, Jim?
No, not really. I mean, I think they're kind of going through a rut, and just being the best player, you're going to take some of the brunt of it. And I think that's just kind of what's happening to him right now. But yeah, I mean, you want to see the turnovers down. I mean, there's no issue to answer Josh's question. Yeah, turnovers are up. I don't have the full stats, but I would guess Pitt's non-conference turnovers versus conference turnovers are much higher. So, but yeah, I think he still does so many good things for them, and like he kind of carries them at times, and he's usually really good in the second half. I mean, you talk about like how he only had 2 turnovers against Florida State in the second half. Usually he does most of his scoring in the second half. I mean, I think the key for Pitt, like I kind of wrote about the other day, is like stop going down by 10 points every freaking game. Then you might not need these like heroic comebacks and like everyone's just going crazy on the point guard. Like just play a complete game and you can avoid a lot of these problems.
Yeah, I think that would be probably a pretty good direction to go. To not fall behind by double digits. Garrett Joe says, curious if you guys think using a 1-2-2 press more could help Pitt's energy. To me, it felt like it changed their energy in both the Florida State and Clemson games and indirectly got them back into it. I don't know. I don't know if I think they can do it well enough to not give up easy baskets. I think it's the kind of thing you need to do pretty often and do all the time, or else you'll get beat. And I think Jeff Capel would get beat on it once or twice and then go away from it. I don't know. I personally think Pitt should just be able to defend in the half court and not need to press. But what do you think, Jim?
It's a good change of pace. I mean, I think they found that whenever they're trailing, it's a good way to kind of climb and make up some points. So I think it works that way. But I don't think there would be a good like we're pressing all the time type of team. I just, especially if they do continue having 2 6'11" guys out there, I think they would just kind of get lost in the press, and I think you would be giving up some layups. I mean, you're asking Guillermo to cover someone more athletic than him for 94 feet. I don't really like that.
Yeah. Tyler Hawk says, after the way Pitt lost to Clemson, I have to come back to a question I asked a week or two ago about the offense that Pitt runs. There was some pushback when I suggested that Pitt doesn't run set plays. Then he follows up and says, to my eye, they run a motion offense similar to Duke when Capel was there, designed to get mismatches off pick action. Then it's up to the guards to create. If Lowe or Leggett are off, it fails. Is there anything to that kind of offense just working better when you have 5-star guards and freaks of nature down low like Duke had? Really feel like the offense itself needs to create more chances. I think that, this is a common complaint. Oh, they don't run offense. They don't run anything. They don't run good sets. I think they could probably run better sets than they run. I think they could probably create better shots through their plays than they get. But it's just not how Capel chooses to play. I think they do run some plays and some sets, but by and large, he likes to have the guards make plays. And I think, for this team, it means Lowe and Leggett driving and either finishing, drawing a foul, or kicking out to a shooter. I think they probably need to kick to a shooter a little bit more than they have, although the shooters haven't been shooting great in the last few games. But ultimately, that's what they do. And I think it could be successful. I think it can be good because I think Lowe and Leggett really are that good. But like Tyler said, if they're off, then the whole game is probably in jeopardy. But I do think that's what they try to do, and it's probably their best plan, short of installing a whole new X's and O's system.
Yeah, I don't think they have enough shooters to really kind of change what they do. I mean, their 2 best assets are, like you said, they're 2 driving guards, and sometimes when you have 2 driving guards, it can look ugly. And whenever the team's in a rut, like I don't want to say this looks like a Xavier Johnson, Trey McGowan's, but like there's been times when it's like, oh, like this kind of does look like that, like where you have 2 guards that kind of both like to do the same thing, and they kind of get in each other's way, and it kind of stunts the whole offense, and it kind of looks like it has the past 4 games. So I'm not quite there yet. I mean, I still think more often than not, Jaylen Lowe is going to be able to get to his spots, make the right decision, and Pitt's going to play good offense because of it. But Yeah, those games when it's like that, when they take away Lowe, they can't even get into any kind of offense. I mean, you see Damian Dunn try to run point guard, they can't even run a set at all. Like there's no semblance of a set. It's just him playing iso ball. And sometimes when Leggett runs the offense, it's kind of the same way. So like they just need Jaylen Lowe to play a little bit better to kind of open up things for everyone else.
A question on football here from the original Green says, when I saw that Ohio State invested $20 million into their roster this season, that worries me about Pitt's chances. We are unfortunately not close to that. You're right. And Pitt's probably never going to have $20 million in NIL money to invest into the roster and payroll, but I don't think they need to. You know, and like a couple of things about Ohio State. So obviously they brought in a transfer quarterback. They've got, transfer running back, a few prominent transfer guys, but they also, Jeremiah Smith's a recruit, but probably was part of that 20 million that they invested.
Yeah.
But Jack Sawyer was a guy they recruited. Like I think I read a bunch of their offensive linemen, or most of their offensive line was like recruited guys. This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. For all the talk about the transfer portal and Indiana brought in 38 transfers or whatever it was, and all the you had transfer this and like the foundation for most of these schools, like the vast majority of these programs, the foundation's still going to be built through recruiting. I think if you're a school like Pitt, Jim, you have to, just like you've always had to do, you have to evaluate really well and develop really well. The new component that's added in now is that you need to invest in retention. And I actually think that might be more important than the money you invest in the transfer portal is retaining. You need to evaluate well and develop well, and then hold on to those guys. And then you use the portal to fill in some pieces here or there. I like Indiana. Yeah, they totally rebuilt their roster from James Madison. And I think they're getting a bunch of transfers again this year. But the thing with Indiana too is like, well, actually, I was going to start complaining about Indiana's schedule and how that's a path that Pitt could follow to get to the portal. Let's just talk about personnel and roster building. Like, I don't think you need to compete with Ohio State and spending $20 million. I think you need to be able to evaluate well, develop well, and hold on to the talent that you do evaluate and develop. Because ultimately, and I found myself thinking this, that sort of a cliched sports question on Monday night during the national title game. How many guys does Pitt have that could start for Notre Dame or Ohio State? Well, that's an irrelevant question. It doesn't matter. And I think if Pitt fans spend all their time trying to compare Pitt to Ohio State and Notre Dame and Penn State and Texas, they're going to drive themselves mad and be really depressed. But you don't have to compare against those teams. You just have to find a way to get into the playoffs. And Pitt's path to the college football playoffs does not go through Columbus. It doesn't go through Austin. It doesn't go through State College. It doesn't go through Eugene. It doesn't go through any of these places. They just need to find a way to the ACC championship game. Because if you're there, you're one game away from the playoff. And they would have been in an expanded field in 2021. In 2022, the path is right there. If they don't blow it against Georgia Tech and Louisville, they're in the ACC championship game. And there again, you're one step away from the playoff in an expanded field. This year, you don't even need to do anything all that crazy. You beat Virginia and Boston College, and then the Clemson game was handed to you. You win those three, which I don't think you're stretching the imagination too far to say. You win those three, it comes down to who wins the tiebreaker, you or Miami. And you're in the ACC championship game, which again, puts you one game away from the playoff, which is where you want to be. And so today's morning Pitt was about how far is Pitt away from the playoff. And I knew the reaction people would have when I put out a video that said, how far is Pitt away from the college football playoff? It'd be like, oh, that's stupid. That's idiotic. And there was actually a comment on the video that was like, I got to be honest. Initially, I thought your premise was ridiculous, but you're right. Because like you don't have to beat Ohio State to get to the playoffs. If you won the national championship, you got to beat one of those teams or a couple. But you don't have to. Every year, there are going to be outliers, non-blue bloods who make the playoffs in a 12-team format. Indiana, Arizona State, SMU. Every year, there are going to be teams like that who get a schedule like Indiana had, where they played two teams that had a winning record or beat two teams that had a winning record. And they were like 7-6 and 8-5. 7 of their 8 wins in the Big Ten came against 7 of the 8 bottom teams in the conference. Like, you get that year where you've got all these winnable games. You just take care of business. You don't have to do anything crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not that far away. The path is very reasonable, I think, to not do it every year and maybe not even win the national championship, but to get yourself within a stone's throw of the playoffs.
No, I agree with a lot of what you said, but like kind of like going back to like the Pitt Ohio State comparisons, like this Ohio State roster largely could have existed 10 years ago. Like not much has really changed. Like it's always been a $20 million roster. Like Ohio State has always had the best team in college football. So I don't think a whole lot has changed. Like the gap didn't get any bigger. Like Ohio State's roster has always been this much better than Pitt's, and it's probably always going to be. And nothing about NIL has changed that. They just get to, all those guys just get to big money now. So I'm with you. Like, Pitt's path is not beating Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. Like, they're not in the Big Ten. They're not in the SEC. They're in the ACC. And, like, as we know, that can still be a two-bid league. We just saw it. And as we know, Pitt is within 5 years of winning this league. So, yeah, there is still a path there.
And it's funny. I mean, you mentioned Ohio State. It's like it's not like this year Ohio State spent a ton of money on transfers and that's why they got there. They just didn't screw up, and they actually did screw up. They blew a game against Michigan, which, didn't ultimately come back to bite them. But it's just like, no, they should have. It's not that this year they figured something out. It's just that all the other years they screwed it up and they should have won a couple more national championships along the way. It just is totally off topic. Is Will Howard better than Kyle McCord, in your opinion, Jim? And if he is it by enough that like that was the difference in the national championship, that they had Will Howard instead of Kyle McCord?
They probably could have achieved everything they wanted to achieve with Kyle McCord. I think they were just, Ohio State fans were mad at like the whole entire program like 3 weeks ago. Like we're not that far removed from it. So like I think Kyle McCord was just part of us, the stench that lost to Michigan last year. All right, we got to get rid of him. Let's get someone new in. And like, I don't know. I didn't think Will Howard was like an inspiring, like whenever they landed him and just throughout the season, he was fine. He was a good player. That's it.
Yeah. He's the guy from Kansas State. I mean, like it's,
Yeah, he's fine.
Fine. RJC Man 38 says, year 7 for Pitt basketball under Jeff Capel, still 0 bench support past the 6th man. Tired legs hurt Pitt in close games, and it's a joke at this point. Look, I don't know what to make of the rotation. My only thought in the Clemson game of why Jorge Diaz-Graham didn't play more is that Jeff Capel was worried about defense. That he was, he was like, well, it's not our offense that's killing us, even though they only scored 30 points in the first half, but it's Clemson making all these 3-pointers. We need to defend better. And he felt like Jorge was a defensive liability. Do you think that's what that one came down to, at least that decision to not play Jorge?
I think a little bit. I don't know. I mean, like the lineup that was out there, like in the second half, was working. Like I didn't really feel like the game 2 weeks ago when they lost to Louisville. It felt like they needed a change. There was no point at the Clemson game where I was like, oh man, like things would really get better if Brandon Cummings or Jorge Diaz-Graham was out there. Like they had the right lineup on the court. So I never get like questions like year 7, still 0 bench. Like what does the team from 6 years ago have to do with this year's bench? Like I don't get the phrasing there.
Yeah. Well, in terms of lineups and roster moves, I mean, there is the ongoing discussion about Guillermo Diaz-Graham playing center. In the Clemson game, he was plus 12. Pitt was plus 12 when Guillermo played the 5. It was an 18-8 run early in the second half, which ultimately helped get Pitt back in the game. They outscored Clemson 7-5 in overtime with Guillermo at the 5. I mean, that's got to keep happening more and more, right? He played 10 minutes at the 5 against Clemson, and Pitt was plus 12 in those 10 minutes. I don't think those two facts are disconnected, that they were plus 12 with Guillermo playing at the 5. I mean, that's just got to keep happening, doesn't it?
No, and I agree. And I think after the game, like someone asked Jeff Capel, because like Cam Corrin played fine, like offensively, like he made all 7 of his shots, and someone's like, why did he not get as much of a chance in the second half? And throughout his answer, he said, he was doing some good things. He made all of his shots, but we weren't winning. And the objective is to win. And like this lineup, we found a lineup that was working. So I don't know if that's going to be telling for the future, but I mean, I think there's just times when Pitt's going to function better with Guillermo at the 5 and as opposed to Corrin. I think because he doesn't need the ball in the post. Like he's just another guy that can kind of float on the perimeter and let the guards do their thing. Like he's not clogging up space. He's just part of the offense. And I think that's why in the second half it just looked better. There was nobody just waiting to get a post-up opportunity. Guillermo doesn't need that. Like, he can just play within the confines of the offense. So I think there's going to be times it's going to happen more. It probably should have been happening more earlier this season. And I just going back to Guillermo, like, that's what he did for 2 seasons. That's who he was. Like, he was Federico's replacement for 18 minutes a game. All of a sudden now he's to play the 4, and you kind of lose those stretch capabilities. And that's he's good at stretching the floor against the 5. It doesn't work just quite as well against the 4.
Even in that Clemson game, the final 2:09, they had Guillermo and Corin on the court together, and the total scoring in that 2:09 was Clemson 3, Pitt 2. So, who knows? And this was after they were pretty effective with Guillermo playing the 5. So it seems like maybe that would have been the better move. But, I do think, like, you said like 18 minutes. I think, like anywhere from, if Guillermo and Corin each get anywhere from 16 to 18 minutes at the 5, and then Papa Amadou Conti plays the other, whatever it is, 5 to 8 minutes at the, like, I think that's a good distribution. You can still get a few minutes for Guillermo on the wing, and then with Jorge also out there and Zach Austin, I think 2 guards, 2 wings, and a center is the way for this team to go. But I think part of that has to, like, if you're going to do that, it's got to include Jorge playing, and it's got to include Guillermo being at center. And then if that's what you do, and you get Jorge out there more, and you get Papa Conti for 8 minutes each game, and you get Brandon Cummings, I mean, now, like, where's your depth at now? You've got 8 guys playing, 9 guys playing, right? Like, decent minutes. Even if the low end of that is Conti playing 8 minutes, I would say you're now going like 9 deep. And I think they can do it. I don't think they need to resort to just 6 guys. I think they're talented enough to play 8 deep, to play 9 deep.
I agree. I mean, I think you can subtract minutes, but like maximize effort. Like, I think Cam Corin might be more effective in 20 minutes rather than 28, 29, 30, or even some of those that Duke game, he played like 38 minutes. Like, that's not who he should be. Like, that's not what you need from your center position. So I think by maybe subtracting minutes, you're getting more value when they're out there.
These guys are all discussing among themselves about Jeff Capel and all that stuff. And, it's same conversations we've had a lot of times. Let's see. Adam Vinchik says, how is Angelo Renda's personality? No, Mason Heinzel was trying to recruit guys to Pitt. Is Renda the same? Jim, like you said, he's going to do that. But how was he to talk to? What was his what was your conversation with him like?
I'm looking. It was a 4-minute phone call, so I'm going to try to base everything I know about Angelo Renda on those 4 minutes. No, I mean, he sounded like a quarterback commitment. Like, talking, it was very similar talking to Mason. I mean, it was, like, I'm ready. I'm already calling guys. Like, let's get guys on board. He kind of had that right personality. So I think last year I ended up talking to Heinzel pretty much all the time. I interviewed him a bunch, so I got to know him pretty well. And I kind of got the same sense from Renda. Just, he's a quarterback, and quarterbacks like to be the leader.
Let's see. Man, looks like actually. So say, what happens sometimes is we get talking, and people are like commenting in real time, reacting to it, but like it happened like 20 minutes ago or an hour ago. So it's, trying to catch up on, people are arguing with us about things that we said a long time ago, and I don't even remember what we said. Let's see. ZC717 agreed with me. All your points were valid, Chris. People get too caught up in comparing yourself to other schools and other conferences. All Pitt has to do is worry about the ACC and nothing else. Oh, geez. Josh Newark wants to know, who's the bigger peak prediction bust, Bengali Kamara or Amsal Dalic? I don't know. I was pretty high on both of those guys. Kind of neither one really panned out. I don't like, what do you think it is with Amsal? Is it just turnovers, inconsistency, defense just not ready to play?
Yeah, pretty much all the above. It just always kind of like, he'll always do like one or two things whenever he gets out there. You're like, oh, like that looked really good. Then he'll just like dribble it off his knee or throw it out of
Yeah.
bounds, and it's just like I don't know. I think they were expecting a little bit more from him just because he's 21. I think they were just kind of like I thought they thought they were getting more of a finished product. I'm guessing.
Yeah. L421 says Jaylen Lowe has a good looking shot, but he just can't make his threes, and we need him to. Yeah, I don't get it with Lowe's 3-point shooting. He was 30. No, that's the wrong. But I was looking down. I had written it down. I think he was 35% last year from three. This year he's like 27, probably dropped even from there. I don't know. Do you think it's just as simple as that old like adage of like he went from being on the scouting report to being the scouting report?
Maybe to a degree because look, he is 28%, and looking at some of his shots, they're forced. They're the shots that the best player takes. They're the ones that like, okay, like this probably isn't a good shot, but because you're our best player, it is a good shot. And so I think some of his shot selection from last year to this year has changed a little bit. He's not stepping into threes while everyone's double teaming Blake Hinson. Like everyone's looking at him. So I think shot selection's part of it, but I do think he has a good looking shot. He was a pretty solid shooter last year, and I think he's capable of shooting more than 28%. I don't know if he's ever going to be 36, 37, but like I think he can live 33, 34.
Yeah, he's also like the volume is way. He's already surpassed what he shot last year, right? Did you already say that? I don't know if you said that. I think even before the Clemson game, or maybe right after the Clemson game, he had like
more.
he had like 88, 89 attempts, and he had 84 last year or something like that, or vice versa, whatever it was. But I mean, so he's also shooting a lot more, but I still think he should be above 30%. You know what I mean? I think that was what Leggett was last year, right? 30, 32, somewhere around there. I mean, I think Lowe could be there, and that would be a huge boost as well. Assist numbers too. Like, there have been games I feel like one of these games in the 4-game losing streak, either Louisville or Florida State, like Dunn, Corin, and somebody else, Austin, maybe were like combined like 4 of 22 from the floor. I think in the Clemson game, like Austin and Leggett or somebody were like 7 of 22. So like, I think his assist numbers would be a little bit better if some of his teammates were making more shots. Not all of those missed shots were passes from him, but at least a few probably were. So I think his numbers could be better. I don't know. I guess I'm just always an optimist. But Luke Olszewski says, I think Pitt Hoops is fine. The ACC is a mess. We just have less room for error now. Well, I think when you look at like where they are to this point right now, Jim, number one, they got the non-conference strength of schedule, which is huge. And Ohio State beating Purdue, when was that, last night? Like, giant win, and helps Pitt. So the non-conference strength of schedule is locked up. That is where they need it to be. And so far they've avoided the bad losses. So if they, those two things right there give them a great chance to make the NCAA tournament. They just need to add a couple of good wins and avoid the bad losses. As you look down this list, are you concerned about, at Syracuse, home against Virginia, home against Miami, home against Syracuse, home against Virginia, or home against Georgia Tech, home against Boston College? Those like Q3, Q4 games?
Not really. I mean, I think like to Luke's point is like, yeah, there are a lot of winnable games left. And, I was just looking 365 days ago, they were one game below where they are right now. They were just coming off a Duke win, but they were, I want to say 11-7, 2-5. So now they're 12-6, 3-4. But metrically, Pitt's in a lot better spot right now just because they have that West Virginia win. They have that Ohio State win. Even the LSU win's not that bad. So that they're in a better spot right now. So I don't know. My theory of like the only month that matters in college basketball is November is starting to hold true because I think if Pitt just kind of keeps winning a few games and like kind of gets to 21, 22 wins, like I don't even know if they'll have to sweat it, even though like last year they were sweating it with 22 wins.
Yeah. And like going into that Duke game last year, they had lost 4 out of 5 games too, right? So even though it was like 2 losses, a win, 2 losses, it's effectively the same as where they are right now. Like they've lost 4 out of the last 5 games this year too, technically. And then when you compare like last year to this year, at this point, like there are like similarities you pointed out. And then last year's team had bad losses. They already had at least one bad loss, if not two. Was like
they lost to
Clemson
Missouri and
loss?
They lost to Missouri and Syracuse. I mean, they lost to Clemson, but Clemson wasn't like they made the tournament. But like Missouri killed them, and like getting swept by Syracuse actually probably kept them out of the tournament.
Right.
So they should win Saturday.
Right. So they already had some bad losses at this point. So, I mean, like, again, this team is ahead of where that team was, which I think is what you want. And this should be an opportunity on Saturday to get back to, break the losing streak, again, avoid a bad loss and head in the right direction. The original Green wants to know, off topic, who's your choice of Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback next year? Mine would be Kyler Murray. Mine would be Justin Fields. What about you, Jim?
I can get behind a Sam Darnold season.
I like it.
Why not? Like I just watched that terrible team play for 17 weeks. I mean, what could Sam Darnold do to me that Russell Wilson didn't already do?
Yeah, but it's more exciting with Justin Fields, I think, because you never know what's going to happen.
I wanted him to play all year. Personally.
Yep. Josh Newark brings up the football schedule because we always like talking about schedules here on the show. It's going to be announced on Monday night, the 27th. The ACC has its schedule release. It's going to be 2 hours long, and hopefully we don't have to wait until 11 o'clock to actually see who Pitt is playing or when Pitt is playing. But Josh says it's impossible to predict an entire football schedule. So which home game will be the Thursday night in November game? You got a prediction on the Thursday night game?
Thursday night. They don't play yeah. I mean, Boston College makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Feels like a Thursday night type of game.
Yeah, I think that's the one.
Boston College. I need to look at the home opponents. Boston College, Louisville, NC State, Miami. Yeah. Is there anywhere they wouldn't send them to Stanford for a Thursday night, right? Like that's pretty much a week-long trip if you do that. I'm trying to think if there's maybe like a road game. Maybe they'll get a road Thursday night game this year.
But I think we went over this like at some point during the season. Like none of Pitt's Thursday games are ever away.
Yeah,
it's always I don't know, but like he's right. It's going to be in November. It's going to be cold, and I think it's going to be Boston College.
Boston College. That feels about right. The week before Thanksgiving or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just so, because, having the Thursday night game the week before Thanksgiving, what that does is basically takes out basically 2 weeks of interviews. We don't have, because Thanksgiving week, we don't have regular interviews. If we have a Thursday night game, we don't have regular interviews. So it would really kind of do us dirty in terms of media opportunities if they do the Thursday night before Thanksgiving. Let's see. See, here's the thing. All right. So the original Green says at the beginning of the season, it seemed like Pitt was playing together. Now it seems like everyone's trying to be a hero. Like, where's the line between trying to be a hero and just trying to help the team win by making a play?
I don't
Is it just the simple difference of whether the shot goes in or not? Because Jaylen Lowe sent that game to overtime on Saturday. Right? He made a layup to tie the game and send it to overtime. And he made a 3 in overtime too, right? But he missed the next 3. The next 3 was a terrible decision. Total me first, ball hogging, hero ball. But so was the first 3, the one that he made. So was the layup that he drew. And I understand there's more nuance to it than this, but I've just been thinking about this a lot this week of yeah, I mean, we love the hero ball when Leggett finishes through contact or draws a foul and goes to the line, or Lowe gets an and one. We loved it when Blake was what was Blake Hinson firing threes from the logo, if not hero ball? Mm-hmm. I mean, really, they didn't run a set play to get Blake a shot from the logo. That's what I'm saying. So where's that? Is it just dependent on whether or not the ball goes in the hoop?
I guess, and I think part of it right now, and I said it earlier, it again starts with falling behind. Whenever you fall behind, usually the best player thinks, "Oh, I need to be the one to get us out of it," and I think part of that is, falling on Lowe and Leggett. So again, stop digging yourself a hole every game, because whenever you try to come back, your best players are just going to have the balls in their hand, and it's sometimes it works and sometimes it looks messy. And lately it's kind of looked messy.
RJC Man 38 says every coach seems to make better in-game adjustments than Jeff Capel. That's telling. Jim, do you know the score in the second half of the Clemson game? The scoring in the second half? I can tell you. It was Pitt 36, Clemson 26. So Pitt was plus 10. I feel like that means Pitt made better adjustments, but that's just me. RJC Man 38 is also a super chatter, so we're going to we will take his comment here. It says Pitt basketball needs an overhaul. Make all the excuses you want. Capel's record is not worthy of retention. Look, I mean, we can make a lot of excuses. I mean, we can talk about how the first 2 years he was trying to recover from Kevin Stallings. The next year was the COVID year. And the year after that was the year that was built on COVID recruiting, which is not good. And when he finally got a chance to put his kind of team together, they made the NCAA tournament. And then they just missed the next year, and now, right now, they're still generally considered to be in the field. So, this is year 7, but not all years are created equal. And those first few deserve, some caveats, don't they?
I think so. I mean, yeah, it was a bad situation. I know you can flip things quickly, but you can flip things better at different schools. So it just is what it is. But I mean, there's still a season going on. I still think they're capable of winning games. If they lose like the next 13, then we can start talking about it. But right now, I mean, they're in the hunt, they're in the fight. And 4 years ago, that's all anyone ever wanted. It was pretty awful whenever the team was completely mathematically out of making the tournament by mid-January. They're in the fight. You can read any bracketology article every day until Selection Sunday, and Pitt's going to be on it in one way or another. And that's still a better place to be than irrelevant.
It sure is. And just to prove that I learned nothing from football season, I guarantee they will not lose out. So, they're going to get more wins here somewhere along the way. Probably as soon as Saturday. This is a game they really should win. I actually think this might be, everybody was putting a whole lot on the Clemson game. This is the most important game of the season. This Syracuse game is probably more important than the Clemson game, and the Florida State game, and the Louisville. Any of these 4 games they just lost, this Syracuse game will be far more harmful to lose than any of those 4. And I would say this game is actually the most important game of the season so far. We'll see what they're able to do. All right, that's all our time for tonight. Thanks, everybody, for chiming in and joining the live stream. It's been a lot of fun. Jim, thank you for your time, as always. Make sure to everybody like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Get all the Pitt video content you can possibly handle and all the Pitt sports coverage at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. All right, thanks so much for your time tonight. We got lots of talk about the quarterback commitment on tomorrow's Morning Pits. Make sure you tune in for that right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.